like I'd be better off all alone. And we can stay up until it's light. Forget my fate, let's kick off to the side. Oh, when the daytime comes, you go. Yeah, I think I'd be better off all alone. Yeah, I think I'd be better off all alone. Think I'd be better off all alone. Yeah, I think I'd be better off Yeah, I think I'd be better off all alone.
We are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Cryptocopia's live stream AMA series. If you're new to the space, if you're new to Cryptocopia, we are a community focusing on all things crypto, where we cover news, trading, all the projects building new or old crypto assets. There's a lot going on here to talk about. I'm your host, Michael Kripkal. You can find me on Twitter or on Discord at Mike Spellcheck. Today, we are speaking with Emin, the founder and CEO of AVA Labs. Emin and his team are developing a completely new consensus algorithm. They use the token AVA to scale faster, to reach decisions on the blockchain faster, and to do so in a completely green and renewable way. Emin, how are you doing today?
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. We're happy that you could join us. So listen, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the beginning of the project and of your involvement in crypto. So I know that Avalanche and that consensus algorithm was built by an anonymous team, right? Team Rocket.
Team Rocket. That's correct.
Of the Pokemon enemy fame, that team of trainers who everyone tried to battle or something like that.
The greatest enemy of Satoshi in Pokemon.
There you go. So how did you start? Did you start working with them? Did they kind of just drop a white paper and then you organized your team to start building on top of what their idea was?
No, it's the other way around. We started working on lightweight consensus protocols maybe 3 years ago. And we'd been working on this topic. A couple of people knew what we were trying to do. Mm-hmm. And then we were contacted by Team Rocket with a white paper that, with essentially a proof sketch that proves certain things that are really difficult to prove. We knew that the core idea we had was an interesting one, was one that was completely revolutionary, and simulations showed that it was working incredibly well. But there's a big gap between having a good gut feeling. There's also a big gap between having demonstrations that something works versus a proof that it will always work under every scenario. Simulations cannot be comprehensive. They only check for certain scenarios. So that last gap between having a great idea that you think will work versus proving to the world once and for all that it will always work is huge. And that was what the Team Rocket guys brought in.
Got it. Okay. So as soon as you had that proof, you were able to start, really building out. I think you guys are in a private test net right now.
Exactly. So we've built up our protocol on top of, or rather, we built up our system on top of the protocol. So the protocol is just essentially a mechanism of a series of steps you follow to keep everybody in sync. But there's so much more to build. So at the moment we're building up, but the minimum viable product is there. The core system has taken shape, and so we are currently in private testnet.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your own involvement in crypto, and how you got to Well, I understand you're a professor at Cornell, but how did you meet the other founders at AVA Labs?
I'm the sole founder at AVA. My involvement in crypto goes back way long time, way back to 2002 actually. So back then, I don't know how many of the listeners were around, but back in 2002, the big issue was peer-to-peer systems were just appearing on the scene.
Mhm.
People were file sharing, and everybody wanted something right out of these peer-to-peer networks. Nobody wanted to contribute. So there was a problem known as leeching or leechers. So
Mhm.
these are people who want resources from the system, they don't contribute. And at about the same time, Bram Cohen was working on BitTorrent. And his big idea was, well, why don't I do tit for tat? You want a block of a file from me, you have to give me a block. I looked at this and my reaction was, tit for tat, that's barter. And it's a fine idea, but it only works if we both want the same thing. Why don't I build a virtual currency where you pay me with money that I can use to ask for things that I want that you don't necessarily have? So I built a virtual currency called Karma for peer-to-peer file sharing in 2002.
Mhm.
And it had this element of proof of work minting in it. So one of the crucial aspects of Bitcoin was something that I did in 2002. Satoshi did not hear of it, but the system was incredibly successful among academics. It's very well cited. It's one of my probably top 5 most cited papers. But it, of course, did not get traction, partly because I was lacking the brilliant part that Satoshi had. The consensus protocol that Satoshi brought in at the time in 2009 was brilliant, and I didn't have that part. Also, my timing was absolutely horrendous. In 2002, everybody was cranking down on value transfers on the internet. They were really worried about Hawala networks, financing of terrorists. It was just like a year after 9/11. It was a
Mhm.
different zeitgeist, different time.
Yeah.
So I was counseled not to pursue it. I was like, okay, for a young assistant professor, this will be a big mistake. And I didn't push it further. Satoshi came after the 2008 crash. That was fantastic, I think, timing. And then he had a very good idea that we did not have, and he built something much better. So that's how I first got into crypto with 2002, 2003 with Karma.
Okay. Okay. Not convinced that you're not Satoshi, by the way.
I'm not Satoshi.
I'm messing.
We've got something better than Satoshi.
And it's I think it's really exciting. Like, I definitely want to ask you a little bit more about your perspective from seeing these different waves of crypto and cryptography, based technologies getting more and less popular over time. But for right now, I want to just ask you a little bit about you do a great job, especially during your conferences, explaining the difference between classical and Nakamoto consensus. And then what you guys are trying to change about both of those with Avalanche and the family of consensus protocols within there. Could you just talk to us about all 3 of those from a high level, like how they're different from each other?
Sure. So the area of distributed systems has been around for about 45 years. It started out in the late 60s, early 70s, I would say, as a distinct area. And one of the first identified problems was consensus. How do you make sure that all of the machines that are part of a system all have the same values? They all see the same series of actions. So how do you make that happen? And to that end, there had been only 2 protocol families that had been developed. The first one we call classical. So this was developed by 2 people, Leslie Lamport and Barbara Liskov initially, and then it took off like wildfire. There are thousands of papers on this topic, and all of these systems have the same flavor. There's a group of nodes. It's not a big group. Everybody in the group knows everybody else, and they communicate with a supermajority. So you write to 67 of the 100 people in the room, you say something happened, I read from 67, and so we will have at least 34 people in the intersection. 33 of them could be Byzantine. They could say one thing to you and one thing to me. But there is that one extra guy who will truthfully carry over the message from one person to the next. So these are fine protocols. They're used in permission systems. So Corda, Hyperledger, Quorum, they're all based on classical protocols. They're good ideas. It's a good idea. The problem is it doesn't scale well in the number of participants. Everybody has to talk to everybody else, or information has to flow from everybody to everybody else. That's N squared. And there's also fragility. I have to know everybody in the room. If
Right.
you're writing to a Senate with a certain set of 100, and I'm reading from what I think is the Senate, but it's a different set of 100 people, the intersections won't work out. The data will not flow properly. Everything will fall apart.
You
So
don't get
that's
that public permissionless property that you do with Bitcoin.
right. So that's why when Satoshi came along, he looked at all these protocols that the academics had developed and he said, look, all of these are no good. Okay. They're just completely not suitable in my setting. And he's right. He has an open setting. He needs a much more robust protocol. And he came up with this idea of proof of work minting. Well, he didn't come up with it, but he came up independently with it. He didn't know who else had done it before. And it's a brilliant idea. And it allowed, with the longest chain rule, it allows the Bitcoin blockchain to keep track of a coherent ledger, right? So how does Bitcoin work? Everybody knows this by now, but there's this notion of mining. And by coming up with a solution to a mining puzzle, I say something like, guys, I'm the leader, right? I acquired the right to lead by solving a puzzle. And I'm telling you what happened in the last 10 minutes. This is my block, here it is. So that's a good idea. It's super robust, right? I don't have to know who else is in the system. All I know is I solved the puzzle. I know who else solved the puzzle. So that is nice, except it's incredibly not scalable. Right? It just ticks along. Bitcoin gets what, 3 TPS per second, 3 transactions per second, and it's incredibly wasteful of energy. So that's actually a huge problem. Some people don't care. Some people don't mind if the polar ice caps melt, if the polar bears disappear. I do. I think a lot of people do, actually.
I think they'll care eventually.
They'll have to care. Polar bears are cool. and we need the poles. But really, more importantly, even for those selfish people, they can see that there's a lot of value leaking out of the system, right? So the miners have to pay the power bills. So the people who are really getting the benefit of Bitcoin are not you and me who are hodling, but it's the power companies. They're making like hundreds of millions of dollars per year.
Yeah.
So that's a waste that should not be. So in comes last year's paper from Team Rocket, and it does something magical. It says, look, we've had 2 families. One family, the people who invented it, they have Turing Awards. The other family, he has 1 million Bitcoins, approximately whatever,
Right.
$8 billion. But there is now a new family, and it combines the best of Bitcoin type robustness with the speed and efficiency of classical. And it works entirely differently. And it gives slightly different guarantees than classical, very similar guarantees to Bitcoin in terms of security. But it allows huge numbers of participants. Anybody can become a miner equivalent in Avalanche. You and I could be the Jihan Woos of the Avalanche world. We don't need to have, mountains of hardware behind us. We don't need to have that tight coupling with the power company. We don't need to have, we don't need to be in bed with somebody's, hydroelectric dam.
Yeah.
So that's an amazing feature.
And so how does that work? If I'm somebody who wants to join the network, do I have to put up a stake? How big of a stake? What are the requirements for me as somebody who wants to spin up a node?
So the way we're designing AVA is, so you could use the Avalanche protocol with anything. And there are people who are proposing to use it with proof of work, right? So this is something I identified early on. I said, look, proof of work protocols would even benefit from having Avalanche for pre-consensus or post-consensus, pre-consensus on blocks or post-consensus on checkpoints. So there are people who are trying to do that. But in AVA, we're building a proof of stake-based system. So we need to make sure that people who participate in the system behave well. And to do that, we need to have them show some goodwill and to show that they have enough skin in the game that they're not going to go and try to destroy it. So that requires them to put up a small bond. And one of the interesting features of Avalanche is no matter what you do yourself, you will always get your coins back. But of course, if you do things to destroy the value of the coin, they will be worth less. So that's what we mean by skin in the game. But notice that slight difference. Almost everybody else who's trying to do Ethereum 2.0, who's trying to do one of these new systems, they're trying to use classical protocols. And classical protocols, they typically require some kind of punishment for the bad actors. They all have some kind of notion of slashing. So if you behave badly, I slash you. I take away your bond. I take away your coins. and that's part of your inducement to act like a nice guy. And we don't have that in AVA. You could have your node hacked. You could have your CPU misbehave. You could have a hardware failure, and you won't lose your coins. This is partly because we believe in monetary systems being calming. They have to be calm. They have to be calming technology. I don't want to have any anxiety as I go to sleep about what's going to happen to my machine. Will I lose my money? If this, that shouldn't be a concern of mine. And so that's one. The other reason why we don't have slashing is we can get away with not having it. Our protocol works differently, and slashing is not a requirement for us. So we don't have it.
Okay, that's something I wanted to ask you about. So you beat me to it.
Okay.
Okay, so if I'm malicious, let's say I'm a malicious actor, and you guys are designing this to prevent a 51% attack, what is stopping me from trying to overwhelm the network? That's this, the amount of AVA that I have to stake, and the just inherent cost of trying to buy that many nodes.
That's the main detractor for that attack. So you will find that it's going to be very difficult for you to amass that amount of capital. That's one. And suppose you do amass it and you launch a successful attack against AVA and you crash the system. Well, then what happens? You're going to be left holding a bunch of coins that are worthless. And that's going to be a huge investment that you drove down to zero. And now let's contrast this with Bitcoin and see what happens for a similar attack. So the amount of money that has gone into Bitcoin mining rigs is approximately 2% of Bitcoin's total market cap. So to launch a 51% attack on Bitcoin, you need to spend about 1% of the total market cap. And then after that, you can mine empty blocks all day long and make the entire system completely worthless to use. And after you've driven the coin price down and you've completely crashed the whole system, you've made everybody miserable, you still have your mining rigs, and you can take them and use them on Bitcoin Cash, or you could use them on Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision, or wherever else. So that's a very different world. You only spent 1% of the coin's market cap. You drove down the 100% down to zero, and you still had that 1% usable on a different coin.
Okay.
Now look at AVA. You had to go buy 51% at least, probably possibly more, of AVA tokens. So that's a much bigger investment, about order of magnitude, 50 times higher investment. And at the end of the day, after you were successful, you were left with zero. There was nothing for you to take to another coin. So it's a much more secure system from that perspective.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you for outlining that. Let's talk a little bit about the AVA token. So how would you categorize that? I know that there are, and it even just depends on the regulatory environment that you're talking about, but you can look at a token or a currency as a cryptocurrency, a utility token. I saw in one of your talks, you described it as a new communication method. So that almost sounds like a governance device more than an economic model. How do you see it?
Well, it's a utility token that serves a bunch of purposes. The main purpose is it allows people to participate in the system. It allows people to, take part and become a member of the network. It also allows people to express their opinions on governance issues. So we can talk about governance in AVA if you like. But the way the token works is very similar to how Bitcoin and Ethereum work. It's also used for transaction fees as well. So it's a multi-use token. You can use the AVA token to create other tokens. So it's got a bunch of different uses. And but one of the most exciting ones, I think, at least for me, is its use in governance. And I can outline how that works if you like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So, okay. So in every other coin, when the designer comes up with the system, he or she has to fix a whole bunch of parameters. So for example, Satoshi, when he came on the scene, he decided, okay, well, I'm going to have 21 million coins. That's great, a fixed supply, which AVA also has. And then he said, look, I'm going to approach that fixed supply according to this halving schedule. So initially we mint 50 coins per block, then 25, then 12 and a half, and approximately every 4 years we go down to half.
Right.
So that's his plan. It's just like this. And, he kind of nailed it at certain times, right? So his supply matches the demand perfectly. And sometimes he fell behind and demand is too high. And then the coin kind of tends to moon during those times. And that's good. And then sometimes he over mints. Like there's, until recently, I would say in the fall, last fall, he was over minting. And why is this happening? Well, because he blindly has to pick one curve for all time. He's getting no input. And you're just kind of like, you're just kind of blindly drawing a line in the sand. And then you have to stick by it he's stuck by it for 10 years. And he's going to have to stick by it for another decade or more if the coin survives. So now, and some people might say, look, Satoshi nailed it, it was not bad, etc. Well, Satoshi's curve was used by Zcash, and Zcash is most definitely over minting right now. Ethereum picked a curve. Ethereum is, in my opinion, over minting. They're paying their miners way too much for the security they're getting. So, it's very hard to get these curves right. And Zcash inherited its curve from Satoshi. Ethereum did something similar. It's almost impossible to get these parameters right. So how does it work in AVA? So here's how it works. Because of the unique way that AVA consensus works, and maybe I should explain how that is, but because of that, we can do governance in a way that nobody else can. So let me very briefly talk about how consensus works in AVA. And essentially, it works by repeatedly polling the audience. So imagine that we're in a giant stadium with a lot of participants. And, this Maracaibo Stadium in Brazil, the world's biggest, right? 100,000 people. I know a bunch of the people there. You know a bunch of the people there, but we don't know this exact same people. We don't have to have exact membership. It's not a fragile protocol. We just know some people in the crowd. And what the protocol does is it repeatedly asks the crowd, hey, guys, I would like to serialize. I would like to commit to the chain the following transaction. You okay with it? And you keep doing this. I pick a set of 5 from that corner of the world and say, hey, you okay? And if they say yes, I try another 5 and another 5. And I repeatedly do this. And at some point, if the answers are all coming back, yeah, you're good to go. And I say, look, it looks like I have enough consensus, enough weight behind me to be able to commit this because I know that other people will be doing the same thing. So that's for the simple case of serializing a transaction, saying Mike paid, Jim, is that okay for everybody? Yeah, we see that it's not a double spend. Let's go with that. That's a typical case. But you could also use it for governance. And in AVA, we plan to use it for some of the most crucial aspects of the system. Namely, in AVA, I or you or anybody can come up and say, hey guys, we're minting at a rate of 2% right now, and it's too freaking high. There isn't enough demand. Let's boost the price by reducing the minting rate. Or vice versa. We're minting at 2%. It's we don't have enough stakers. Let's boost the number of stakers by upping the reward. Let's go to 2.5%. Let's see what that does. Okay. So all of those changes are governance issues, and I can propose a transaction, and I start once again polling the audience, like, hey guys, I'm going to change this number. You okay with it? You okay with it? And if there is enough social consensus, if people are voting yes on my change, then the protocol will adopt that change and will then move to a different point of operation. So that's an amazing thing. It allows us to not have to bake in parameters for all time. I can just say, look, we're going to start with a set of default values. And if the crowd, everybody, not everybody, but close to everyone thinks that we should move to a different point of operation, we will. We can change the minimum capital requirement to stake, a question that you ask. How much is it going to be? By the way, I'm hoping it's going to be low enough to allow participation from a broad base of users. I would say a few $1,000s is what I would like it to be. Okay. But it starts out a few $1,000s. Maybe we have too many or too few, and we can change it. Or minting rate. We're going to approach the same fixed cap, but the way we approach it will depend on our users, our audience. And so that's an amazing thing to be able to do, to actually have a firsthand say in the monetary policy of the system. You are the Fed. You and I make up the Fed in AVA.
That's actually exactly what I was just going to say. So, you have the dynamic pricing or the rate schedule that changes. It's not a fixed monetary supply, to compare that to a central bank, but it's not being decided by, some foundation that you guys created. It sounds like it's going to be decided by the crowd.
Exactly. There are no centralized entities making decisions. It's all the
Okay.
crowd.
Got it. Listen, we're going to switch to community questions in about 5 minutes. But I wanted to just honestly ask you a little bit about, I know you're a pretty involved account, personality on crypto Twitter. So who are some of your favorite accounts to follow? Like, who do you like to get your information from?
Who do I follow or get my info from? Oh, a whole base of people, a broad range of people. So I follow Vitalik. He's always very insightful. I follow Tony Arcieri religiously. I follow Zdes Bascule on Twitter. I follow some of the crypto lawyers on Twitter, Angela Walsh specifically. Follow Dan Robinson, Zaki Manyan. I could go on and on. I follow both camps, so I listen to what's happening in Bitcoin Cash. That's an interesting, they have a very clearly defined vision for how to make the system scale. So Dedal Nix, Roger Ver, I have to follow what they say to see what's going on in that space.
Yeah.
I follow what's happening in the Bitcoin circles. So a lot of the Bitcoin Core protocol devs I follow, starting with Christian Decker, and certainly going through the whole lot. Some of them turned out to be not so great on Twitter, but Peter Wulla I listen to, Matt Corallo I check out, Jeremy Rubin for sure in Core. I don't follow I try not to follow any of the toxic personalities. I'm not going to name them. Mm-hmm. There's a lot in crypto Twitter, which is fine by me. I try to make them less toxic. They were invited in by certain people, and now the very same people are complaining about the people they invited in, whose coattails they rode. It's kind of interesting to see, but it's okay by me. If a group wants to immolate themselves, that's fine. I'm not going to fight them. Let's see. I follow what's happening in privacy, so I follow Zuko for sure. I could go on like this all day long, so stop me. I follow what's happening in any group that's doing active development. I try to follow. Okay. I love the Eternity guys. They're doing Bitcoin NG, a system I worked on previously. Mm-hmm. There's a whole lot of others that I can.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why I ask is crypto is just it's such a fascinating space. It's so fast moving. So I'm sure everybody feels, that it's hard to keep up with, just because I feel like the deeper down the rabbit hole you go, the more there is to learn about, and the more wide ranging topics, you start to learn economic theory a little bit more deeply than you expected to a year ago, or, there are so many traders to follow, but there's so much just very low level, but amazing research being done too.
Right. It's very interdisciplinary. So if anybody says they're an expert at it, they're definitely not an expert at it.
I feel like you should be suspect immediately.
Exactly. There's so many different fields involved. I have had to do so much reading myself, and I feel like I only own a tiny portion of the big space.
So you mentioned some of the other camps within crypto. Would you say that you see any projects as competition for AVA, or would you say that you're more of a constructive or friendly competition? Is there anybody that is going for the same thing that you guys are, or maybe not?
I think everybody pays lip service to the kinds of things we want to do, but I don't see anybody having technology that comes anywhere near what we do. So we're very friendly with other groups. We're very friendly with other groups that are science-based. Anybody who's science-based, they can come in. I will spend a day with them. We'll hang out. We'll have a great time. That's always been the case. I've never wavered from this position. Non-science-based groups that run their communities like cults, I avoid like the plague. And so cultish behavior, brigading, social media manipulation, these are red flags for me. The moment I see them, eject button gets pulled, I'm not involved. As for competition for AVA, we're very driven. We closed an initial seed round in February. We announced the private net in May. So we're not one of these teams that's sitting on our backsides, spending our day on crypto Twitter, arguing with people. I did that for a while, and if they want to suck at life in their own unique way, that's fine. That's their call. So what we're doing is just delivering stuff, and we're not really in competition. Our model is very different from everybody else's, and I can expand on that. Our technology is incredibly different, and you're now seeing other people try to adopt it. Both Bitcoin Cash and IOTA have announced things that are very, very similar to Avalanche, or they are in fact Avalanche. So we're in a very unique position. We're not seeing ourselves as being in competition with others. And also, I'm really excited about the next phase of our growth. So at the moment, we're building the platform, and very soon, as soon as the mainnet is live, we're going to start going up into verticals. We're going to show the world how applications ought to be done above the consensus layer. So we're really excited.
Interesting. Could you briefly outline that a little bit, or is it something that you're not really releasing just yet?
Yeah, so I can outline the general meta strategy, if you will. So it's a funny space, right? It's been 10 years. And if I look around, I actually don't see that many groups that are really vibrantly doing development. I could name a few. There are a few, but it's not more than a few. And I also don't see any application builders. So everybody got the idea that the world values platforms, and everybody went down into the platform level, and then they ran out of ideas. And the name of the game right now is you go back to the 80s or 90s. You pull out a dusty old classical consensus protocol. You put some new makeup on it, and then you serve it to the masses as if it's new. So I'll name names, right? Hedera Hashgraph, for example, is just PBFT. Okay, this is a protocol we knew about. It's from 1999. It's, as an academic, if I see somebody rediscovering something, but not realizing that he's rediscovered something, I think that's an embarrassing moment, right? But somehow they're around, they're pushing their coin. There are a bunch of other ideas like this. So that's what we're seeing, right? So everybody is trying to come up with new platforms, and there aren't enough application developers. So we want to build some applications the way they need to be built. And our next stage of growth on AVA is going to involve doing some of the things that I don't see the community doing. Where there is credible efforts, like Augur is a great effort. I love it. Gnosis, these are good projects. Where there are credible efforts, we don't want to compete with them. They should, of course, come and build on whichever platform makes sense for them. But there is so much opportunity in this space. And I think a large portion of the community is trading. A large portion of the community is holding and shilling. And not enough people are building. And we are builders. That's what we're good at. That's what we're going to be doing.
Got it. Cool. Thank you for outlining that.
Good.
Why don't we, Gun, let's move on and start asking the community for some of what they want to hear. Let's open it up to Cryptocopia. So the first user that wants to hear from you, utility tokens, they want to know, in what way is it better? In what way is Avalanche better than proof of work consensus from Bitcoin?
Okay, so let's go through the different ways. Proof of work consensus has a couple of issues that are fundamental to the way it works. It's inherently limited in two different ways related to scale. It's limited in throughput because the best it can deliver is whatever the programmed block size divided by block interval is. So Bitcoin delivers 1 megabyte of transactions every 10 minutes, and that comes out to 3 transactions per second. Actually, that's different now. Like they have the weight calculation. Maybe it's slightly larger. It might be 5 transactions per second, but that's a tiny number for throughput. Just for comparison, I'm pretty sure on a Saturday, the IKEA stores in New York are doing 5 TPS. Okay, and I want to run the world. I don't want to run IKEA. If I'm going to have difficulty running IKEA, then what the hell am I doing trying to aspire to world domination? It's just my dreams are high. My technology is right here. I need to go and do some soul searching. That's one. Second is participation. So proof of work protocols typically end up having inherent centralization. So why is this? Lots of different factors. One is just availability of mining rigs. Okay, so if you want to be a miner, you have to be in bed with Jihan Wu or Bitmain or whoever else is manufacturing the best miners these days. And Jihan's been particularly cool in how he distributes his hardware. But in general, that didn't have to be that way. And we see this in other coins. You have a dominant rig manufacturer, and he owns the coin. He owns all of the mining. So you have to be in bed with mining rig manufacturers. You have to have cheapest energy, right? And so, the person in some questionable country who bought out an old factory and he's bypassed the meters or whatnot, he's getting free electricity. He is going to have a lower cost per coin than everybody else. And because of the competitive nature of mining, that guy will drive out everybody else, right? At some point, you and I and other law-abiding people, we'll hit our cost level, and we won't be able to mine profitably. That guy can mine at any value, any price of the coin, and he's going to dominate. So, and so what do we see? Like, people can say, well, they can have counter arguments. It doesn't matter what the arguments and counter arguments are. If you actually look, and I did, I have a peer-reviewed paper on decentralization and Bitcoin and Ethereum. Ethereum has 11 mining entities. Okay, so some of them are solo miners, some of them are pools, but sum total 11 of them. Bitcoin has 19 of them. That's it. It comes down to 19 entities. And if law enforcement wanted to do worldwide coordinated subpoenas or letters to serve, they know how to serve 19 letters. We've seen them take down enormous crime networks of multiple hundred people. They can serve hundreds of letters at a time. This is not a problem for law enforcement. So 19 is not sufficient censorship resistance in my book. And if they shut down all the miners, then the next day the coin is just stuck. So these systems are not very scalable in the number of participants.
Okay.
And then finally, the energy consumption. So the amount of energy going into Bitcoin is approximately, let me do this right, I think it was at its peak, 4 Irelands, 2 Denmarks, and 1.5 Czech Republic, or something like 1 Austria. Austria is a very big industrialized nation. Imagine taking all that energy and pouring it into this block creation process. It's just a complete waste of energy. You could redirect it to aluminum smelting. You could redirect it to anything and do something more useful for mankind. And we should be doing that. So very briefly, how is Avalanche better? Avalanche has throughput that's much higher. Our private testnet is currently getting something in excess of 6,000 transactions per second. So that's faster than Visa. So for years, we had the core devs in Bitcoin repeat time after time that you can't compete with Visa. You can't reach that number. And they can't, that's correct. Not with that technology, but with Avalanche, we can. So that's a very good position to be in. So we have the throughput. By the way, we also have incredibly low latency, sub-second latency. About a second is how long it takes for transactions to confirm and achieve finality. Not 10 blocks or whatever, 6 blocks, not 60 minutes, but about a second.
Okay.
Number of participants, we can have millions of participants in the system firsthand. And energy consumption is incredibly low, many orders of magnitude lower, because there's no mining involved. You don't need mining rigs.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
Definitely. Yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you for getting into that. Next up, we have corrupted aesthetic. How will your academic and research experience translate into leading a cryptocurrency initiative?
I think it's mostly a negative, to be honest. so okay.
Oh.
Yeah, so let's do this right. Okay, so I don't think academics have the upper hand on any topic, really. They tend to be cliquey. Academics tend to focus on the wrong thing. Many academics focus on things that don't actually matter. This is like the defining characteristic of an academic. Here's how we see this in crypto. I see a lot of my colleagues new to crypto pick up a problem that is completely irrelevant, but interesting from an academic perspective. For example, worst case scenarios. There are lots of worst case scenarios in crypto, and I see them sacrifice the typical case, the average case, to make sure that some esoteric thing that never used to happen even less often. So that's a common thing. So you have to make sure. So I actively find myself trying to make sure that my academic approach doesn't get in the way of what we need to do. So that's my take on things. But there is one thing in which it helps, or I don't know if it helps, but at least there's one way in which it's defining for me. And that is a firm commitment to scientific pursuit. So we're incredibly data-driven. We're incredibly evidence-based. So if some stuff is not working, then it's not working, and I'll be the first one to call it out. We're not here to build a cult. We're here to build using scientific methods to advance the current state of the art and build something that nobody else can. And so that's what I'm trying to do. That's the one way in which being an academic helps. Oh, I guess the other thing is it helps me attract really bright people. I'm really proud of my team. There's nothing like it in any of crypto. I just have had access to very, very smart people. So I'm super, super delighted about that. And in every other way, I try to fight having been an academic.
I've never spoken to an academic who sounds like Nicholas Taleb.
No, Nick Taleb. Yeah, no, he's right. He's right in many different ways. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You got to have skin in the game. That's right.
Yeah, that's super interesting. WQP is next up. How much money did AVA raise? Is the fundraising still open? And if so, which round?
We did a seed round, and it's kind of interesting. So until recently, like there was some orthodoxy about how much money is raised in each round, right? And people used to say, when I was a graduate student, a seed round was $100,000. And, I would say until 5 years ago or so, a seed round would have been 200,000. But crypto has upended all this stuff. And we were particularly fortunate that we got some really, really good investors. And they saw the promise. In fact, I went to just a few of them. I went to 3 of them. The first 3 I went to, they funded us. And then they brought in a few other people. So I'll name the amount in a second. Our investors are Andreessen Horowitz, Polychain, Metastable, Initialized, which has Gary Tan and Alexis Ohanian in it, and Balaji Srinivasan. And so this is a good lineup. And also Ramtin, by the way, Ramtin Naimi. So that's a good lineup. And we raised $6 million from them. And that's the initial amount that we've been using to build up our company.
Okay. Yeah, it's good company to be with.
Yeah, they've been fantastic.
Next up, Lugacker. How will AVA coins be initially distributed? Are you going with an ICO, IEO, or maybe some other means?
That's the $1 billion question. It's so hard to come up with an answer to that one. So I can answer in principle, then I can try to give you some outline. So okay, so here's the deal. So the protocol itself is decentralized like no other. And so we have to do justice to it. So when I go online with the mainnet, I want to have hundreds, if not thousands of nodes out there. If there's more, then I will absorb all of them. The protocol is able to have, as I said, tens of thousands of participants, up to millions. So my goal is to be able to allow that to happen. I don't want the wealth concentrated in just a couple of hands, because that would be the biggest disservice to this great idea that we could do. So we want to avoid that. And the question is, well, how do you do it? And the answer is, I don't freaking know. And so I can commit very firmly to the principle that I want to get as much AVA into as many hands as possible. That's what I'm yearning to do, because that's what drives the success of the project, right? This is critical for me. But how do I do it? I don't know. And so Andreessen Horowitz just held a meeting for all the regulators. It was fantastic. It was only last week. I met with Hinman, the SEC commissioner. And
oh, wow.
It's like, he was there. And in fact, the New York Attorney General was there. The feds were there. FinCEN was there. CFTC was there. The entire set of regulators were there. And the meeting was really interesting. Hinman was actually sandwiched between 2 questioners, if you will. He was literally sandwiched between 2 great lawyers, and one of them was an ex-commissioner himself. And they just said, look, you got to give us bright line rules. You got to give us some clear set of guidelines so we can follow and be in compliance. Nobody wants to break the law. And we know that Bitcoin end result is a good result. You think that that's a currency, that's great. You think that Ethereum is now a currency, that's great. Well, then how do we get there? Tell us how to get there. So they haven't told us how to get there, but their body language was interesting. So they've identified clear scams, and they haven't issued a ruling about the middle ground. So there is a lot of freedom, if you will, in the middle. So I'm not sure what we're going to do. There are things like IEOs. We might enlist the help of an exchange to get the coins into the hands of a large number of people. There are companies emerging who help, again, with the coin distribution. We might get their help. We are not going to be doing a direct sale to the public ourselves, because that's a little too risky for a company, right? Nobody wants to go to jail. Nobody wants to do something bad. And just because you have one idiot, with dual citizenship or whatnot, and suddenly you're in regulatory, issues, you're facing regulatory issues. I don't want
Makes
to.
sense.
So that's we're going to do something in the middle there. But the principle is, like everybody else who's been following AVA, I also, more so than anybody else, I want to get these coins into as many hands as possible. It's not going to be a VC coin. It's not going to get centralized in a couple of hands.
Awesome. Darier is up next. What's the current stage of development in AVA, and when do you expect to be live with the main nets?
Those are sensitive questions. Current state of development is pretty good. We have something that is currently in operation, and it's also in flux. We're changing it every day. But the part that's in operation implements the entire base functionality I've talked about. So that involves multiple different kinds of exciting transaction types. It involves the AVA coin itself. It involves the ability to have multiple coins and transact in them. It involves atomic swaps, staking, unstaking, minting, and governance. So governance also involves serialization. So we have the notion of being able to create a serialized sub-log within the DAG. So some of the techies following the conversation, that will mean something to them, not necessarily everyone. So that's the current state of affairs. We still have a bit of work ahead of us. I want to make it really easy to issue digital assets on this platform. It's not that easy. We have a DAG Explorer, so you can see what's happening in the DAG. That's kind of cool. I want to make the accoutrements, the DAG Explorer, for example, much better and easy to use. I want to have a wallet that's usable by humans as opposed to command line, wizards. So there are a couple of things that are missing. And of course, smart contract functionality should be part of some release. If not public testnet, it should be part of what we call V2, version 2. So that's our approximate roadmap. The timing is highly critical and highly confidential. All I can say is it's going to go out when it's ready, and we're working furiously.
Okay, that's fair. Totally fair. Fox has a longer question, but a really good one. So they want to talk about decentralized applications. Speaking of smart contracts, apparently dApps are failing to get adopted due to slow finality, to the cost of adoption. For example, like transaction fees, like paying up to $4 for transactions in order to breed a kitty or send a message on the current platforms. So does AVA plan to solve these performance and economic issues?
Fantastic question. Absolutely, yes. And we have a bunch of ideas for how to do that. So anytime I talk about AVA, I focus on the core contribution. And the core contribution is this consensus protocol. And that really was the initial impetus for the project, but it's by no means the only contribution. And we have what I consider groundbreaking ideas at every other level of the protocol. So you will notice, for example, that AVA's network model is very different. And if I may take a minute to talk about it, let me talk about this.
Go for it.
And then I will go up a level and talk about things that impact app adoption. So, so the AVA model for the network is really different than everyone else's. And, you see us doing this to everything, right? The consensus protocol, totally different than everyone. And now the model is different. So what's everybody else's model? Well, everybody else has one coin, one language, and then one network, right? So Bitcoin has a scripting language and has one network. And anytime you want to make a tweak, you want to add an opcode, then you have to fight it with all of the people in the network saying, well, I'm Luke Jr. and I'm running a Raspberry Pi and it's in the swamps of Florida and it can't handle 80 bytes of an op return. It has to be 40 bytes or whatnot. You get friction and cracked voices no matter what. So that's a big issue. And for Ethereum, it's the same deal, right? I want to install a really large smart contract. You can't. Why? Because the network only supports up to this size. So the AVA model is different. We see ourselves as a platform of platforms. We see ourselves as a Lego construction kit. What does that mean? In AVA, we plan to have multiple coins, So there can be AVA coin, that's the native coin, but I can have a Gun coin, you have a Mike coin, there's like a X coin, Y coin, Z coin, right? So you can have any number of coins.
Okay.
They can mix and match and use any scripting language. So you can say, Mike coin is, you know what? Mike coin records real estate. And it has special rules. If two Mike coins are for adjacent plots, they can be merged into a bigger plot, like real estate. Okay. So, and by the way, I'm going to support Bitcoin script because I want to use Bitcoin wallets. But I also you can say, I also want ZKPs from Zcash, and I also want Monero ring signatures. I want privacy for real estate. That's all doable. And the best of all, and this is the most important part, the nodes themselves can have different features. You can say MikeCoin is supported by yellow nodes. And what are yellow nodes? This is a color you assign to nodes. And so, for example, you can enter into a private transaction with these nodes and say, look, guys, all of you, the yellow nodes, if you want to be yellow, you have to, I will pay you. And you promise to me that you will keep your records for 100 years because this is real estate. It's not your stupid, system where you join without an agreement. But instead, this is going to be a legally based system.
Right.
So in essence, you can have sub-networks within the network. So if you want to install a really large contract, you can on nodes that have extra space. If you want to have privacy for your contract, you can. The internal state doesn't have to be known to everyone. So this is a pretty amazing feature. Okay, so I've talked for a long time. I guess this is another aspect of having been an academic. I talk to. I'm a little long-winded, but I'll wrap up. At the user experience level, we have a bunch of changes coming up. They will only be made visible at mainnet, but we want to just revamp the whole stack. The current usability of existing systems is abysmal, right? You start out and the first thing you do is you're stuck, right? It's like you need coins and you have to buy Bitcoin, you have to get verified, blah, blah, blah. There are a whole bunch of problems with building apps on top of this platform. The platforms are not well thought out at all. And we will fix them. So we can't wait to do that.
Awesome. Well said. We have a lot of questions to go and we only have time for a few more, unfortunately, before we have to wrap up. But, thank you everybody in Cryptocopia for, letting us know what you want to hear from Gun. Okay. Wootards is curious if the inflation and minting rate is decided by the community by staking a significant amount of AVA.
Yes, absolutely. It's decided by the community by staking.
Cool. Thank you. Mathis is asking, can you tell something about the energy efficiency of your consensus algorithm?
Sure. All it requires is a small number of messages to come to finality. So in Bitcoin, it requires 6 blocks to get to finality. In fact, the number of blocks it should require is actually not necessarily fixed at 6. It should go up the bigger the attacker is. So the confirmation times should be bigger for Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Satoshi's vision. In fact, confirmation times for BSV should be very, very, very high, maybe infinite. But in any case, let's take Bitcoin. 6 blocks, that's 60 minutes of hashing. And so 60 minutes of hashing is an enormous amount of energy. So it's 1 hour of Austria's energy consumption, right? That is significant. Like a lot of things are spinning, turning, being burned, and so forth. In AVA, if you want to achieve consensus in a 100,000 node network, the number of messages a single node has to send, and that's all it has to do. It has to send some number of messages. That number is approximately the number 5 to 10. So let's say 10. 10 multiplied by a number less than 20. So about 200 packets. The energy required to send 200 packets is in the milliwatts range. It's a fraction of a watt. And so if you multiply that by 100,000, it's just a couple of watts. It's essentially nothing. A couple of watts for a tiny fraction of a second. So it's essentially nothing. Many, many orders of magnitude, probably 6 orders of magnitude, I would say, between us and Bitcoin. It might be 9 orders of magnitude. A huge, huge difference.
Got it. Super cool. Tobias and Mathis are next up. They want to know the 3 main objectives for the upcoming testnet. Mathis is wondering, in addition, what 3 challenges do you expect to run into? Oh,
good questions. So really, there's only one objective for the private testnet, and that is to enter into partnerships with people building things on top. We got a huge number of applications to be part of our private testnet. We are grateful to the community for that, so thank you all. I was so humbled when I saw the number of responses. My inbox flooded. But they mostly came from people who want to be part of the staker network, and we're not taking on stakers right now. We just want to partner with people building things. So that's the current private testnet. Public testnet, the goal is to shake out the system. The code will be made open source at that point. We want as many eyeballs as possible. We're going to start going through security audits at that time. So there is much to do. We want people to stake on the public network. People should start experimenting, getting their hands dirty when we go public. So that's that. So now the three objectives for the system: be a payments rail, be a digital asset tokenization platform, and enable smart contracts. Those are the three objectives for the system.
Okay, and then three potential challenges that you might be expecting, or maybe you have run into during the private testnet already that you guys have worked to overcome.
Sure. At the moment, we're very busy trying to get our numbers up. We had a previous implementation in C++ that doesn't have all the functionality I talked about, and that implementation gets like 19,000 TPS. And our Go implementation gets about 6,000 TPS. So if you ask me what I'm working on these days, or the team is working on, they're really busy trying to bridge that gap and get that number up. We know it's possible with 1,000 participants to get 19,000 TPS. We can do it.
Wow.
We're trying to get there. Well, I don't know if we were going to be able to do it in Go. Right? It might require too much re-architecting and so forth. But that's, improving our performance is one of our goals. Other challenges. Getting the coins distributed fairly. That's a really big, and in a compliant fashion, regulatory compliant fashion. That's a big challenge. I spend a lot of time on the legal side of things. And then the third one is connecting with application developers and getting people to build on top. So I realized that I need to have more to offer them. I don't have the public testnet yet. So when that happens, I'm going to start actively pursuing these partnerships. But that's a challenge, right? A platform without a use, we're not a hodl platform. I think those platforms are dead before they leave the gate. We're a platform to be used, and we'd like to get people to use us. So we want to get to the public testnet and enter into partnerships. Cool.
Last one, guys. Corrupted aesthetic. Will Ava's deployment progress along? Will Ava's deployments progress along academically proven steps, similar to how ADA with the Cardano team develops?
I'm not sure how they develop. They are great people, but they develop slowly, very, very slowly. I love Agelos, and I watched Charles turn his project around by following scientific methods, right? So Charles had what a lot of people have called a checkered past from Ethereum, but he's been nothing but fantastic at the helm of ADA. So what are we doing? Yeah, obviously, as I mentioned, it's one of our core values to always be science-driven, to always be evidence-driven. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that, for example, the entire project that we worked on, we didn't announce it until we had all of the proofs necessary. This is something that ADA did as well with Ouroboros protocol. Okay. So we're going to try to do our best to make sure that we build a sound system in a sound fashion. And we're trying to do that. I don't know if we're going to follow the exact same things that other people have. We're a fast team, and what we're doing currently is working well for us. So we want to continue on that path.
Awesome. Goon, just one more question. What are you excited to see happen in the rest of 2019? What developments, just in your team, but also in the bigger crypto space as a whole?
I think we're so okay. So here's what we've seen with really cruddy technology. We saw the space reach $800 billion. So that at a time when we could only do a few transactions per second. So I'm confident we're going to break $1 trillion as a space. This is going to happen. This year, I'm not sure if that's going to happen this year. But, let me give you my long-term vision. And, I think in terms of academic years anyway. So the next academic year from September to September is how I think about it.
Okay.
But roughly speaking, we're gonna break a trillion, and we're gonna break a trillion as a group. We're going to all rise together or all sink together. I think a lot of the things that I've been saying about how we have to, our real enemy is out there. It's not among crypto Twitter. It's not that we're not playing a zero-sum game, right? I'm not going to get $2 extra from a BTC supporter. I'm going to get $2 billion from some company that wasn't using a blockchain out there.
Right.
So the infighting that we see is a dead end. People who engage in infighting, people who encourage infighting, and communities that encourage infighting are an anathema. They are our actual enemy. It's like the people who pull you down. And we want to just shed them aside. Those guys can play those games all day long, and they're not going to go anywhere. We're going to see some teams emerge that understand where the real battles are and that know how to fight them. Technically, we're going to see a lot of proof of stake protocols emerge. Many of these are based on classical protocols. We're going to see some incredibly hilarious technical failures because classical protocols are fragile. We already saw Stellar just stop. It was, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago. Just for a period of 2 hours, they had nothing. And it turned out that they had a centralized node and somebody turned it off and then the entire system collapsed and nobody knew and because nobody uses it. And it was really funny. We're going to see other funny episodes as well. It's a buyer beware kind of a situation. Be careful what you're getting into. So there will be some interesting failures. And as an engineer, anytime you see a failure, it's interesting, right? It's even though it might be slightly morbid, it's technically interesting.
Right.
So we're also hopefully going to see, actual applications develop. We haven't in 10 years. There have been very few actual apps with actual impact on normal people, and it's high time. And if nobody does it, my team is going to try and do it. But I'm hoping that as a community, there will be some good things that come out as well. So I'm excited. There is much work to do ahead, and the world of finance, the world of business is ripe for disruption. Lots of incumbents will lose their actual position. It's not going to happen in a year, but in 5 years. And I can't wait to change the world and move it to a better foundation.
Gun, I don't think anybody could have said it better. Thank you so much for doing this with us. Can you just tell us real fast, where we can follow, you on Twitter, your project? Should we be checking out your blog, Medium posts?
Sure. I think the best starting point is avalabs.org. It's a very preliminary site. We spent no time on it, but it's got some pointers to everything else. My own Twitter handle is Elite Haxor, EL33T H4XOR. And it's in jest. It's not really meant to be taken seriously. But in any case, I'm Elite Haxor on Twitter. I have a blog at hackingdistributed.com. Many people in crypto follow it because we post about interesting developments there. We have a Medium. We have a bunch of other forums that we haven't been using all that much. There's also an Avalabs account on Twitter that you can follow, though it's never tweeted before. It's got many thousands of followers. So that's the situation. And if anybody wants to contribute, stay put for the public testnet, and we would love to have your contributions to this new exciting protocol.
Cool. Well, listen, I'm sure everybody in the community is going to be following closely. Everybody, if you're free to Cryptocopia, if you're new to Cryptocopia, you can follow us on Twitter, at crypto_copia. Feel free to join our Discord. That's through our website, cryptocopia.com. Like and subscribe on YouTube because we're doing these AMAs originally weekly. Right now we've been doing a bi-weekly schedule, but we just love bringing on guests to our channel just to kind of pick their brains and learn about all the exciting things that are happening in this really fast-moving crypto space. Goon, thank you just one more time. Really appreciate you taking the time. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Thank you very much for having me, Mike.
Of course. Take care. Until next time.
Take care. Bye.
Do we go left? I see no signs. Do we go right? I can't decide. Do we turn back? Do we turn in your face. First up to mine, what are the days? End up in time, how do we fall? How did we fall? Do we go left? I see no signs. Do we go right? Can't decide. Do we turn back? Do we turn